cut the chain. That was the first thing I heard that morning. Metal screamed as bolt cutters snapped shut, and I stepped onto my porch just in time to see 3 county trucks blocking my street like a crime scene. A tow truck idled at the curb, orange cones, clipboards, phones already recording. "Hey, what the hell is going on?" I shouted. The HOA president didn't even look at me. She pointed at my gate. "Emergency compliance," she said calmly. "Remove the obstruction." A deputy walked up and handed me a paper. "Sir, this is a final lien notice. $18,900. Due today." For what I asked? A lock. "You're denying community access," the HOA president cut in. "We've warned you before," I laughed.
Not anymore.
"Access to what?" "That's my driveway." She finally turned, smiling like she'd already won. "Not anymore." I held up my phone. "Show me the easement." She tilted her screen toward me. "Already filed. Yesterday. 4:12 p.m. "That's impossible," I said. "I never signed." She leaned closer. "You don't need to sign something that already exists." The bolt cutters closed again. The chain sagged. "Last chance," the deputy said quietly. "Open it yourself." I stared at the timestamp on her filing, then noticed the name under applicant. It wasn't the HOA. And that's when I realized this wasn't about my gate at all. Tessa Marrow is the president of the Riverstone Commons Homeowners Association. Mid-40 seconds, perfect hair, that polished HOA confidence that comes from never being told no. She didn't wait for permission. The HOA president stepped past the deputy and onto my driveway like she owned it, heels clicking, phone held chest high, so the camera caught my face. "Document everything," she told the crew. "He's been non-compliant for months." "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice even, "you're trespassing." She smiled without warmth. "This is now a shared access point. You should have read the filing." I pointed at the gate. "That easement doesn't exist." "Oh, it exists," she replied, tapping her phone. "It just didn't yesterday morning." That was her talent, turning paper into power before anyone could question it. She motioned to the tow truck. "Once the gate's gone, the board will vote to keep this permanently open. Safety issue." "Safety for who?" I asked. "For the development," she said, then caught herself. One slip, one word too many. She recovered fast. "For the community." I recognized her name then, not from my street, but from a quiet planning hearing last year. Same blazer, same smile, same promise that nothing would change. A deputy cleared his throat. "Sir, if you interfere, we'll have to." "I'm not interfering," I said. "I'm asking who filed an easement on my property without my consent." The HOA president lowered her voice just for me. "You bought a choke point. We're fixing that mistake." Behind her, the crew tested the cutters again. She nodded once. "Open the gate, or we will." And for the first time, I understood this wasn't harassment, it was a takeover. The cutters didn't come back down that morning, but the pressure did. By noon, 2 HOA volunteers were parked across the street, phones out, zooming in on my gate like it might confess to something. One of them called out "Smile" for compliance, and snapped a photo when I didn't answer. An hour later, a notice hit my inbox. "Unauthorized barrier. Daily, fine pending." That afternoon, the HOA president herself returned, this time without cameras. "You can still make this easy," she said, resting her hand on my fence. "Remove the gate. We'll recommend a reduced lien." "Recommend to who?" I asked. "The board," she said. "And the developer?" I watched her realize she'd said too much again, and pivot. "The community needs access. Emergency vehicles. Pedestrians." I pointed to the dead-end sign 10 feet away. "Nobody walks through here." She shrugged. "They will." That night my lock was tested. Not cut-tested. Fresh scratches on the shackle. Intentional. A message. I replaced it with a heavier one and set my phone to record. The next morning, a neighbor I barely knew knocked softly. "She's been doing this to river-adjacent lots," he whispered, one by one. I checked the footage from overnight. No faces, just hands. Gloves. Deliberate. Professional. My phone buzzed again. Inspection scheduled. Tow truck authorized. And for the first time, it was clear this wasn't a nuisance campaign. It was rehearsal. The letters started arriving certified. Not one, not two, 3 stacked in my mailbox, like a threat delivered in triplicate. Notice of access violation. Notice of safety non-compliance. Notice of scheduled inspection. Each one stamped with the HOA seal and signed by the board secretary like bureaucracy could make trespassing legal if you used enough ink. I called the number on the letter. "The board has voted," the HOA president said immediately, like she'd been waiting. "Inspection is tomorrow at 8. Tow authorized." For what I asked. "There's nothing broken." "You're obstructing a recorded easement," she replied. "County file backs us up." I pulled the county portal on my laptop while she talked. Parcel map, boundaries. Then I saw it, an easement line slicing straight through my driveway, perfectly drawn, perfectly wrong. That filing's brand new, I said. My survey from closing doesn't show that. Then your survey's outdated, she snapped. We'll remove the gate during inspection. The next morning, they showed up like a show of force. 2 board members, a contracted inspector with a clipboard, and right on schedule a tow truck idling at the curb. Phones out, photos taken before anyone spoke. The inspector walked my driveway without making eye contact. Routine, he muttered. We're just documenting. Document this, I said, holding up the parcel map on my phone. Why does the easement date say last week? He hesitated. Long enough. That's above my pay grade, he said, stepping back. I noticed something else, then the filing ID number. Out of sequence. Skipped ahead like it had been rushed through. I called the county clerk while they were still standing there. Put it on speaker. This easement, the clerk said slowly. That was expedited. By who? I asked. There was a pause. By a private applicant, she said, with a development interest. The HOA president went very still, and suddenly this stopped feeling like enforcement and started feeling like a deal. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the county portal open, refreshing pages like the truth might blink if I stared long enough. The easement filing was real, that much was clear. Recorded, indexed, accepted. And sitting right there, under grantor, was my name. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close enough to fool a clerk on a deadline. Wrong pressure points, wrong slant, a rushed imitation. My stomach dropped as the implications landed all at once. This wasn't a mistake. This was fraud, and my house was the collateral. I pulled the document history and followed the thread backward. That's when I found the developer packet, not public-facing, buried under a zoning amendment proposal with a bland title. Riverwalk Connectivity Phase 2. Budget line $1.6 million. The access route highlighted in the plans ran straight through my driveway. I called the title attorney who handled my closing, sent him the filing. He called me back in 10 minutes, voice low. That easement didn't exist when you bought, and this notary stamp. He paused. It doesn't match the commission records. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Don't freak out, a man whispered. They did the same thing to my cousin. Sold access that wasn't theirs. I asked him why he was calling me. Because once it's recorded, he said they slap a lien, force a sale, and the developer pays them on the back end. I looked back at the lien notice from that morning. $18,900 due today. High enough to hurt, low enough to seem routine. A pressure point. For the first time, fear cut through the anger. Not abstract fear, real cold fear. The kind that rewrites your future in a single paragraph of legal text. They weren't trying to scare me into opening a gate. They were trying to erase me from the property, and if I didn't stop it fast, the next letter wouldn't be about access. It would be about foreclosure. By morning, I stopped arguing and started calling professionals. The title attorney met me on a video call before I finished my coffee. He shared his screen, zoomed in on the easement filing, and went quiet. See this, he said, circling the notary block. That commission number expired 2 years ago. So it's fake, I said. It's fraudulent, he corrected. And whoever filed it knew exactly how to push it through. I drove to the county clerk's office anyway. Not to complain, to ask questions out loud. The clerk who pulled the file avoided my eyes. This was expedited, she said again. Same-day processing. By who, I asked. She lowered her voice. Someone with an existing relationship. They came prepared. Prepared meant attachments. Prepared meant fees prepaid. Prepared meant confidence no one would push back. On my way out, my phone rang. Unknown number. You didn't hear this from me, a woman said quickly, but code enforcement's been told to lean on you. Hard. Why? Because if the access gets delayed, she said, the developer misses a milestone. And that costs people money. That afternoon, a county surveyor showed up unannounced. No threats, no cameras, just a tripod and a laser level. I was asked to confirm boundaries, he said. Off the record. He worked in silence, then packed up and handed me a card. That easement line, he said quietly, it cuts through private property with no lawful origin. Before he left, a cruiser rolled up. Same deputy as before, different tone. Off the record, he said you should get your paperwork ready. If this turns criminal, it's going to move fast. As he drove away, my phone buzzed again. A text message. No name. One line. Check the HOA treasurer ledger. Start with consulting fees. That was the moment the pressure stopped being theoretical. Because someone inside was scared enough to talk. The ledger wasn't hard to find. The HOA kept everything transparent on a members-only portal, password-protected, poorly monitored, and apparently never audited. I logged in using the same credentials they'd sent me when they first tried to find me for a trash can violation 2 years ago. Buried under meeting minutes and landscaping invoices was a folder labeled Professional Services. That's where the money was. Month after month, payments routed to a company I'd never heard of. No address, no phone number, just a name that sounded safe enough to avoid questions. Civic Path Consulting. The totals climbed fast 5 figures at a time until the number at the bottom of the page stopped me cold. $240,000. I cross-checked the dates with the county filings. The expedited easement, the lien notice, the inspection order. Every move lined up with a payment. My phone rang. The HOA president. I let it go to voicemail. She texted instead. Emergency board meeting, tomorrow. Community center, attendance required. Then another message seconds later. You should come alone. This doesn't need to get uglier. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded screenshots to my attorney, then to the title company, then, after a long pause, to the county investigator whose card the surveyor had slipped me. No commentary. Just evidence. A final text came in as I shut my laptop. You think you're protecting your driveway, she wrote. You're standing in the way of something much bigger. That night, the neighborhood went quiet in a way that felt staged. Porch lights off, curtains drawn, like everyone was waiting for the same storm. I laid out my documents on the table, easement filings, ledger screenshots, notarization records, and set my phone to record. Because by morning it wouldn't be about threats or fines or access anymore. It would be about what happens when a room full of people realizes they've been used, and whether the person who did it would still be standing when the door opened. The community center smelled like burnt coffee and nerves. Every folding chair was taken. Neighbors I'd never seen at a meeting before lined the walls, phones, half-hidden eyes darting between the board table and the door. The HOA president sat dead center, blazer-perfect gavel, placed just so, like she could still control the room by force of posture alone. She opened fast. This meeting is about safety, she said. A homeowner has obstructed a critical access route and exposed us to liability. Murmurs rippled. She didn't let them settle. We've offered cooperation. He refused. She continued nodding toward me without looking. The board recommends immediate action. I stood. You mean foreclosure? I said. She smiled thinly. If necessary. A deputy shifted near the back wall, not intervening, watching. The board secretary raised a hand to call the vote. Before you do, I said, voice steady, can you explain why the easement you're citing was filed last week with my forged signature? The room went still. She laughed once sharp. That's a serious accusation. I agree, I said. That's why I brought the county. The door at the back of the room opened. A man in a county investigator's jacket stepped inside, badge visible folder under his arm. Good evening, he said calmly. This meeting is now part of an active investigation. The HOA president's smile didn't disappear, but her hand tightened on the gavel. The investigator didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I'm here regarding an expedited easement filing, he said, setting his folder on the table. Parcel ID ending in 7-4. The HOA president leaned forward. This is a private board matter. It stopped being private when a forged document hit the county record, he replied. I connected my phone to the projector. The screen flickered, then filled with the easement file, my name typed under grantor, the signature magnified beside it. That's not mine, I said, and the notary commission expired 2 years ago. Gasps cut through the room. Someone whispered, that's illegal. The investigator nodded. It is. I clicked to the next slide. A ledger screenshot. Civic Path Consulting, highlighted in red. These payments, I said. They total $240,000. The HOA president stood abruptly. Those are consulting fees. For a developer tied to Riverwalk Phase 2, the investigator finished. Which requires access through this driveway. I flipped one more image. A time-stamped email. Here's the rush request, I said. Filed the same day the lien notice printed. Her voice sharpened. You're misrepresenting. The investigator held up a hand. Ma'am, please don't. She didn't stop. This board followed procedure. He turned to the deputy. Please collect the president's phone. Her words tangled. You can't, this is do you know how much money is? She froze. How much money is what the investigator asked? Silence stretched heavy and public. She tried to recover. You could see it, the calculation behind her eyes, the scramble for a version of events that didn't end with handcuffs. This is a misunderstanding, she said too quickly. The consulting fees were approved. The easement was routine. Nothing here rises to bribery, the investigator asked, opening his folder at last. The room leaned forward as one. He slid a single page across the table and turned it so everyone could see. A wire transfer labeled expedite fee, he said. $25,000. Sent to a public official 2 days before the filing. Her mouth opened, closed. That was for processing, she said, voice cracking. Everyone knows you have to grease. She stopped. Too late. The deputy stepped closer. Ma'am, he said gently, I'm going to need you to stand up. Board members started talking all at once. Denials, distance, hands raised like they'd never met her. One of them slid his nameplate away. Another stood and said, I resign, before anyone asked. She backed up from the table, shaking her head. You don't understand, she said to me, now eyes wild. If the developer misses this access, the deal collapses. Do you know what that costs? Yes, I said. My house. The investigator nodded to the deputy. The phone was bagged. The gavel sat untouched. As she was escorted toward the door, someone clapped. One person, then another. Not for me, not for justice. For the end of something that had been squeezing the room for years. The doors closed behind her, and for the first time since this started, the silence felt earned. No one rushed for the exits. People stayed seated like the room itself needed a moment to recalibrate. The tension that had been humming under every conversation in this neighborhood finally snapped, leaving behind a strange, weightless quiet. I felt it in my chest first. My shoulders dropped, my jaw unclenched, my hands stopped shaking without me telling them to. Neighbors started approaching in small clusters. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. I'm sorry, one man said. She threatened us too. We didn't know how far it went, a woman whispered, eyes glossy. Another neighbor squeezed my arm. Thank you for not backing down. Across the room, board members avoided eye contact, packing up folders like they might disappear if they moved fast enough. A few people pulled out their phones, not to record this time, but to text, to call, to finally say out loud what they'd been afraid to before. I leaned against the wall, breathing in the burnt coffee smell again, and realized I wasn't bracing anymore. No scanning faces, no waiting for the next threat disguised as policy. Just the low murmur of a community processing, the fact that the rules they'd been living under weren't inevitable after all. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a problem that needed managing. I felt like I belonged in the room. The investigator didn't summarize. He itemized. He looked down at his notes, then back at the room. First, he said the easement filed against this property was forged. The homeowner's signature was falsified and submitted as an original legal instrument. A murmur spread. Second, the document was notarized using an expired notary commission, making the filing invalid on its face. He didn't pause. Third, this filing was unlawfully expedited through the county system after a $25,000 payment, labeled as an expedite fee, was transferred to a public official. That constitutes bribery. The word landed hard. He flipped the page. Fourth, HOA funds were embezzled. A total of $240,000 was diverted through a shell entity, Civic Path Consulting, under the false pretense of professional services. Several board members visibly recoiled. And finally, he said, voice firm, now these actions were coordinated to facilitate a real estate fraud scheme, using a fraudulent easement and lien to pressure a homeowner toward forced sale, directly benefiting a private development contract valued at $1.6 million. Silence followed. Heavy, public. The consequences are immediate, he continued. Felony charges are being referred to the district attorney. HOA accounts are frozen pending audit. Restitution is mandated for all misappropriated funds. The board's authority is suspended, effective now. He turned slightly toward me. The lien on your property is void. The easement is expunged from county records. Then he addressed the room. New safeguards are imposed: no future property reclassification without homeowner consent, an independent third-party survey, and a public vote. No one argued, because there was nothing left to twist. No one moved for a moment. Then the county investigator's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, nodded once, and said it out loud so the whole room could hear it. The Riverwalk contract is suspended pending audit. Developer funds are frozen. That did it. A sound rolled through the community center, not cheering, not clapping, just relief. The kind you hear when a pressure valve finally opens. Someone laughed softly. Someone else wiped their eyes. The board members who'd stayed silent all night gathered their folders and slipped out without a word, like the building itself had rejected them. I walked to the window that looked out over the parking lot. My driveway gate was visible in the distance, still locked, still standing, untouched. Behind me, a neighbor said, "So what happens now?" I didn't turn around. Now, I said, we stop being scared of paperwork. The investigator handed me a printed notice, fresh ink, official seal. Easement removed. Line released. I folded it once and slipped it into my pocket, not as proof but as closure. Someone pushed the abandoned gavel toward me across the table. I didn't pick it up. I headed for the door instead. As I stepped outside, the morning air felt different, lighter, quieter. I pulled my keys out, heard the familiar click as I locked the gate again, and for the first time since this started, it wasn't defiance. It was ownership.